You're listening to Beyond the Dose, the podcast where healing, self-discovery, and transformation intersect. Hosted by Michelle Harrell and brought to you by PurpleCityExperience.com. Each episode explores the power of psychedelics, science, and soul work to help you reconnect with your purpose. It's time to go deeper, beyond the medicine, beyond the noise, beyond the dose.
Everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Dose. I am Michelle Harrell, your host, and I'm excited to welcome today to the show Sarah Van Hoose from Journey to Influence. Sarah is a financial coach, and I recently had a fantastic opportunity to actually experience her services firsthand, and really excited to have you on the show today because I think we all know that financial stress is the number one stressor for adults. Many adults cite that it's the number one stressor in their lives. And, you know, this show focuses on all aspects of health and well-being. And so it just made sense to invite you on the show and talk a little bit about, you know, ways in which folks can try to manage that financial stress for themselves, how they can dig themselves out of debt or create the freedom and the lives that they're hoping for. So welcome, Sarah, to the show.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your story and how you ended up becoming a financial coach and what that means for you.
Sure. Like you alluded to, like financial things, right? Money related tasks or stress is huge. It impacts so many different areas of our life, right? From our physical health to our mental health, our spiritual health, our relationships, like so many things that it touches. That's why I think getting your finances straight is so important because it does has this positive domino effect or negative domino effect, right, on these other components of our lives. Let's see. So my story, right, my background, my husband and I had a little over $450,000 in debt when we counted it all up outside of the mortgage that we were in or the house that we're in right now.
Yeah.
When we realized that total number, we had never really like taken the time to count it up. But when we were challenged to do that, I was like, oh gosh, no wonder I'm feeling this pressure, you know, just kind of this like constant pressure on my chest. At that time, our daughters were 9 months old and 3 years old. So little, tiny. And we were both, my husband and I were both working full time. And I was not the mom that like felt the need to stay home with them and teach them their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. I was cool with like going to work and letting somebody else do that at preschool. But at the same time, I felt robbed of my option to choose. I felt like I had a forced choice because
Right.
we needed both salaries. So that pricked something in me to say, I don't want anything else to choose for me, right? A little bit of a control freak over here. Like I want to have control. I want to make my choices. I want to have options to decide what I want to do. So it was at that time that we decided to really get serious about figuring out our finances, about creating a budget and really getting out of debt. So we were pretty traditional for the most part. We had a couple credit cards, we had a couple car loans, we had a couple of student loans, and we also had 2 additional income properties or rental properties that weren't intended to be rental properties. They were houses that we moved into and purchased when we changed locations and then like couldn't sell or the market wasn't good. So we
Right.
just kind of turned them into rentals.
Yeah.
And they
I have a similar story. I did the same thing. Yeah.
So we're sitting here. These rental properties are also a stressor, right? Because the tenants are good but not great. You know, we're having to, you know, recoup and recover some stuff after they're moving out. Not always sure that they're going to pay their rent. If they don't pay their rent, like we're screwed, right? Because we're already tight over here. So what we did was ultimately sold those 2 properties. We didn't net much, but we were out of that obligation, you know, overall from that amount. We got super creative about how we looked at our finances and what we did. And about a couple of years later, we got completely out of debt except for our house and then and have remained that way. So what that did was buy us margin and options, right? At that point, like if one of us wanted to work less or work part-time or do something different, we could because we didn't have so much of our income going towards monthly payments. So it was a significant shift in our mindset and really our outlook. So I told everybody that I could about it, right? Family and friends. And fast forward a few years down the road, 2019, I was burnt out from my healthcare leadership role and really just wanted to quit. And my husband's like, well, maybe you should do something, you know? I was not really quitting age, you know, and he probably knew that I would go crazy a little bit if I just quit. So I started down the path of entrepreneurship and took a coaching certification around financial coaching and then launched my business January 2020. I did that as a side hustle for about 18 months until I felt like it could sustain what I needed to sustain. So I retired from my role after 20 years and have been coaching full time ever since.
Amazing. And I mean, that's a big number, 450,000. So I just want to pause there because I think there are probably a lot of listeners and folks out there who are feeling like they can never get out from under the debt. You know, so many, we know, I don't know the exact statistic, maybe you do, but I'm sure it's very high, the number of Americans who are carrying significant debt and living day to day and really just struggling to make ends meet and not feeling like they don't see a way out. They don't see any kind of light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, how could I ever get ahead of that? And so that is, you know, I think that's pretty incredible. And I'm sure you had a lot of friends and family just if they knew your story asking you like, how in the heck did you do that? And how can you help me do that? Because that just seems so huge to me. When I heard that number, I was like, wow, that's a lot. I thought because I have debt as well, you know, I think
Hmm.
most of us
Yeah.
do. And as a solo entrepreneur and single mom, it's a struggle. It keeps me up at night just like everyone else. But that is a really big number. So I can't imagine. I would feel the weight of that if that was me. So how did you guys, you know, manage to climb your way out like that?
Yeah, so breaking it out a little bit, you know, and I don't know that I have the exact numbers, but when it came down to it, the non-mortgage debt, right, was about 70,000. So, and this is, you know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So our car loans were not quite as expensive as car loans are today, but I feel like we had like, you know, maybe $30,000, maybe 35 in car loans, and then, you know, maybe 5 or $10,000 on credit cards, still had another 10,000 on student loans. So we had, you know, 50, $60,000 in straight up consumer debt like everybody else. 'Cause the
Mm-hmm.
mortgages were a little bit unique.
Sure.
And that I see that a lot. You know, I see folks with very common to have ten to $20,000 worth of debt. Not uncommon at all to have twenty to $60,000 worth of debt. It's a little bit more unique outside of a student loan, perhaps, to have over 100K of a personal loan or credit card debt. But I've seen a lot, right? I've seen a lot of different situations, and what it comes down to really is number one, awareness. You've got to be willing to kind of look under the bed of what your financial situation is. Otherwise, it feels like this big scary monster that is keeping you up at night. But let's actually figure out like how big is that monster? Is it a 50K monster? Is it a 10K monster? Once you really have some awareness around what that total is, you can start to plan around it. And the other thing that was really unsexy, you know, like about what we did with our finances was like we tracked what we were doing. Like we tracked our spending. We said, okay, we're going to spend X amount of dollars in groceries and we're going to spend Y amount of money in restaurants and we're going to limit our travel budget to A, B, and C. And then we stuck to it. We really had to be on the same page about what we wanted to do with our finances. That was critical. We wouldn't have been able to do it if one of us was not
Yeah.
on board, right? It's
Yeah.
it's just too hard, right, to tackle a shared goal like that as an individual instead of as a couple if you're married. And then we stuck to our guns, you know, like we still practiced what I'd call values based spending. We didn't ever adventure and travel is important for us. My husband and I have an anniversary on December the 1st, so we are always go away for our anniversary, and we decided, you know, that we weren't going to not do that. That was important enough for us to continue to do that trip. And but it sometimes looked a little bit different, you know, than what it
Mm-hmm.
had on the past, right? The credit card vacation
Yeah.
was maybe a little different than the cash flowed vacation.
Right.
But it still felt, you know, special and unique, like we were still stepping out and like doing something that was important to us and willing to spend money in that way. We started using more cash. And to this day, right, we've been out of debt for years now. I still pull cash for groceries. We pull cash for what we call our entertainment or our fun money. Restaurants fall in there. And when we're out of that money, we stop spending on that item.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that people cringe a little bit about. And I'm like, if you're serious about it, and if groceries, I will just very commonly, groceries are a huge expense. They're more expensive today than they were yesterday. It feels like, and they're obviously a necessity. But it's really easy to go beyond what you thought you were going to spend at the
Yeah.
grocery store when you just like take your cart right through the aisle. So being intentional about what that looked like. So we started doing more meal planning, not meal prepping. Can't get behind cutting all my vegetables, on Sunday night. Like I can't do it. But meal planning and being like, all right, what do we have in the freezer? Well, there's chicken in there and there's some
Yeah.
beef and it looks like there's a salmon fillet. All right, like that's a good start, right? So who's here? Who's home this week? Who's doing what? There's only two of us home this day. All right, we're gonna do breakfast for dinner. All four of us home on this day. Let's do salmon that night. So really kind of like planning our week ahead and be like, all right, who's
Mhm.
who's doing what? What do we already have at home to like start our baseline meals? And we really only plan dinner. Everybody figure out what you need for breakfast and lunch, stuff around. And then we supplement at the grocery store. So I make a list of what we need to complement the meals that we kind of laid out and take the list to the store and make sure that I stay on budget that way. It's again like it's not sexy, it's not brilliant, it's not something you haven't heard before, but it works.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I used to meal plan not for financial reasons, just simply for time. As a working mom, when my kids were young, I was like, I don't want to go to the grocery store every day. Like once a week and plan the meals. In fact, I hate it. I hate planning meals. And now that my kids are grown and I'm an empty nester, I kind of love that I don't have to do that as much, but
Yeah.
um yeah. But gosh, I hated doing it, but it was a necessity just for time. So yeah,
Mhm.
and financially that makes a lot of sense. So I think that's, a great tip. Again, not sexy like you said, but
Yeah.
sometimes these things aren't. And I want to go back to what you said about, still honoring your anniversary time and still getting away. I think a lot of people assume that the advice will always be like, you have to discipline yourself and deny yourself. And so I love that take that you guys sit down as a couple. I think that's so important that couples do this together, because if one of you is, endlessly shopping on Amazon and the other one's trying to save money, it doesn't work. But as a couple, to really sit down and talk about your values, because it's more than money, right? It's about what is important to us as a family, as a couple. Where do we want to spend the extra income that we may have? Different people are going to have different priorities, and those will shift at different times and chapters of your life. But I think sometimes we go into things like this, like it's all or nothing. I'm gonna have to give up everything that I love, which can be a hurdle to even trying and starting. So I love that, you talk about that, and you help your clients do the same, right? Sit
Yeah.
down with them, because it's not. So walk us through. I know a little bit because I did this with you recently for my business more than my personal finances, but I think the process is probably similar. Walk us through how you start an initial coaching conversation, because I imagine it's not a lot about the numbers. It's more about what's important to you, what are your goals, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It really is not about the numbers. People often, are like, what do I need to bring, to this first session? I'm like, just yourself, like maybe some awareness around what you want to do. And then we get to kind of unpack like, where are you right now, but where do you really want to be? What are those goals for yourself and for your family? And what's keeping you, do you think, right, from getting to your goals? How important is it? When we talk about goal setting and where you want to go, we think about the priority. Ultimately, we'll choose one priority to work on at a time. Like we're just going to uber focus on one thing. Maybe it's the XYZ credit card that you want to pay off first. Maybe it's getting a little bit in your emergency fund to cover you on a rainy day or when your tire blows out. We're going to pick one thing at a time. We're going to know what's next, in the lineup, because these things are nowhere close to your goal. People come to me so often, they're like, I just want to get out of debt. I was like, great. but what else? Right? What else
Mm-hmm.
do you want after that? Because that's a short journey. Even if you got 100K, it's just a blip of your life, right? We've
Mm.
got a whole lot more living to do after that. What do you want next? Because getting out of debt is not incredibly motivating. It's not super fun. What else do you want, right? We really need to be kind of looking past it to be like, all right, I really want to be able to send my kids to college without them having to take on student loan debt. It's so important to me because I don't want them to have the burden that I carried around for another 20 years or whatever the case may be. All kinds of different goals that have different money stories attached to them. And we really have to figure out what you want now, what you want next. Because that next thing is usually what keeps you motivated through kind of the hard times. And then
Mm-hmm.
we got to pick intensity level. There are some people that are like, yes, balls to the wall. Like, I am ready to like slash everything. I will never see the inside of a nail salon again. Like, I am in it. I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's see how far you can take that. And then there's others that like, you know what? I love getting my nails done. I think I can go from twice a month to once a month. But it's really important to me to keep that. Great. You have to choose your intensity level that is sustainable. And even the never going to the nail salon again, you could do that for a period of time. Like you could choose, like for 1 year, I'm going to be really strict. But truly creating a sustainable plan is one that considers what your reasonable intensity level can be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think we do this similar, many of us do similar things with nutrition and diet. It's like, especially around this time of year, it's New Year, people think they're going to go balls to the wall, and then 2 weeks in, they start to drop off because it's not sustainable. So I think that's really important to really be honest with yourself about what you may or may not be able to sustain. And, I think a lot of us, myself included, didn't get a lot of education on money and how to manage our money, especially, I mean, for me as a business owner, zero. But even personal in my personal finances, I mean, I got basics, from my parents, and they instilled, don't buy things you can't afford, that kind of stuff. I think there's so many of us, there's so much shame and so much emotional baggage that we bring in as adults. And so I can imagine, just like in my industry, sometimes folks are even embarrassed to reach out and talk with you, and kind of like, oh gosh, she's gonna see all the dirty laundry, right? So how do you handle that with your clients, and maybe talk a little bit about, what you've seen and how that trajectory of going from kind of shame and guilt to feeling more empowered, feeling the freedom and the peace that comes along with digging yourself out of debt, and getting excited even about where you're headed.
Right. It is it's so interesting to me to see how that plays out. There certainly can be a lot of shame and guilt over not doing better, knowing more, like I should. There's lots of shoulding that happens. People are shoulding all over themselves. I should have known better. I should have paid this debt off by now. I should have this figured out. And what it comes down to when they finally have kind of the courage to seek some support and say, "Hey, I've been working on the same thing over and over, and I'm realizing that it is part of that insanity cycle. I've said each year that I'm going to do XYZ, something happens, I get a bonus, I pay off my debt, and then I turn around and I bring all that debt right back up again. I should know better. I realize that it's not working out. I need some help." And that is like number one. Like, okay, so you just like raise the white flag and really we normalize the conversation. Happened to you? Happened to me too. It's happened to all my clients as well. Like, it's okay. You are very normal, and we're going to figure out what to do next. And we're going to align that with like how you naturally operate best. We're not going to take you from this is your practice to doing something completely different. We're going to find out what works best for you and in your flow. And ask truly is like, all right, you've done your next best step to ask for help. Can you let me carry some of that burden for you for a little while, and can you let that go? Like,
Yeah.
when there's no longer shame is never going to serve you. Guilt can sometimes serve you in the fact that you're deciding to do something different, but then it's time to let it go and give the opportunity to do something different and let that work for you. So we really work through a lot of that initially, and it'll still creep back up when something happens, and we just continue to kind of work through that. And a lot of my clients are parents as well. And as parents, we tend to want to do better for our kids. We want our kids to do better than we did. And so figuring out your finances as a parent is only going to serve your children that much better, right? Otherwise, they're watching you, whether it works or whether it doesn't work, and they're probably going to mimic the exact same thing that you're doing. So let's let them mimic something positive ultimately in like what
Right.
we're doing within our lives. So that can be a big motivator for people to stop living in the past and start really living for the present and the future.
Yeah, and I think so many of us tie our self-worth too to, somehow it gets all jumbled up together, our self-worth and where we are at financially and what success, how we define success. Especially in this culture, a lot of us have been swayed to believe that success means a lot of stuff, a big house, big fancy trips. There's definitely with social media, especially for our kids, I think so much pressure to show the world that you're living this, big, beautiful, fantastic life all the
Hmm.
time. And life is just not like that. There's a lot of mundane day to day, not that exciting, right? Like the unsexy stuff that you were talking about before. And so I think that's such a good lesson to model for our children. And, I'm a big believer because I don't want my kids to have to take out loans. And I have a freshman in college and a senior in college right now. And, very vulnerably, I'll share, had originally set aside a bunch of money for both of them for college. And unfortunately, the stock market and the economy took a nosedive at the same time that I started these businesses. And so ended up not having as much as I had kind of promised them. And I had so much guilt about that. I mean, I was, losing sleep and crying and worrying about talking to them about it because I felt like I was letting them down. But, at the end of the day, I think it taught them also I hope that it's teaching them a good lesson that, things do change sometimes that are out of our control. We're still working hard to try to make sure that neither of them have to take out any loans and graduate, without debt. But I also think there's something healthy about them having a little skin in the game. Um, and understanding like, hey, this, mom had planned certain things, life didn't go as planned, and sometimes we have to pivot. I can imagine while you're working with clients, things happen, people get sick, people die, expected expenses come up, right? Life keeps lifing. So how do you kind of coach and help clients pivot along their, you might have a plan and then you have to kind of change that plan up halfway through or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I love that you talked about the pivot and the flex. When I work with a client, we follow this 5-step plan to thrive, I call it, where we are dreaming, prepping. So dreaming, it's really goal setting and really thinking kind of beyond, right? That initial goal. Prepping our head and our heart for change. Planning, like making the plan. The 4th step is flexing, and the 5th is celebrating and thriving. That 4th step is coaching. It is where the flex happens. It is where the freak out moments happens. There are wins and celebrations that happen within that. But we go into it saying, hey, we're gonna craft the best plan possible. Something's gonna come up. Just so you know, in our time working together, it's gonna throw our plan off track. And the skill building that we're doing here is how do you stay on target, overarching, still working towards your goal while being able to flex and pivot around without just what's the wagon term? Um,
Without falling off the wagon.
falling off the wagon entirely, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. Or we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to
Right.
still stay on the wagon or whatever. It's going to jostle, like it's going to change, like we're going to get stuck in the ruts a little bit, like, but we're going to keep going. That is a skill that typically when I'm working with clients up until that point, they have a tendency to bail, right? When the wagon
Right.
goes off course.
Right. I mean, that's pretty human. A lot of us
Yep.
panic and
Yep.
freak out, right? So yesterday I got to, walk through my business finances with you. And I loved the whole profit first kind of practice that you kind of that you taught me. I still have more homework to do, but do you want to maybe share a little bit about like, because does that work for, I imagine that works for personal finances too, when you're thinking about budgeting and how, what's important, like you said, and where do you want to spend money still? You still want to get your nails done once a month, or you still want to,
Hmm.
have some of these these things that are non-necessities.
Mhm.
How does that translate to personal finances?
Yeah, it certainly can. Like I shared, like following somebody's kind of natural tendency for how they use money or what goes with their flow as close as possible. I've got some clients that use want to track every dollar, and we are creating a zero based budget, meaning we are quote unquote spending, right? Every dollar that comes in, it's got a job, it's got an assignment, whether it's saving or paying down debt or going to the nail salon. And then I've got clients that are more naturally just need a boundary, right?
Mm,
And so those folks are often we're setting up maybe a couple of different accounts for them, similar to the profit first model, where they have a bills account, right? Where we
mm-hmm,
know how much needs to be in here each month that covers the rent and the utilities and all your basics that have a due date. And then we have another account, sometimes two, that is for more discretionary purchases. And some of them, sometimes we split that into like, we got groceries and household project products and Amazon related items and here. And then we've got fun stuff, right? Nails and
mm-hmm,
hair salon, whatever. We also usually implement a couple different unique savings accounts to target future spending, essentially.
mm,
An emergency account is intended to be spent on an emergency if needed. A holiday savings account. We all spend money around December of every year. So how do we make sure that that's not a surprise? It's not a like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this just happened. And it's not an emergency, right? So how do we plan for that more intentionally? Your home or your car needs maintenance. Guaranteed, like I don't know when it's going to
yeah,
happen. I don't know what's going to be due, right? But you're going to need something. So having some intentional savings or accounts set aside for those things so that they don't get muddy, in your grocery budget, they don't get muddy like somewhere else. And you really can feel a lot of confidence the next time you're like, oh, my tire just blew. Not a problem. I've got a little auto maintenance account over here that I can pull from. So I've been setting aside money each month to go into that. We're going from being reactive in your spending, right, or in your money management to proactive in your money management and more intentional. So that's true for everybody, regardless of kind of what method they use. But my clients that choose this like kind of percentage base or various accounts, they spend on fill in the blank, like whatever their heart desires or how much their heart desires until they're out of the money in that account.
mm-hmm.
And then it's a boundary.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how, if somebody wanted to work with you, how long do you typically work with folks? Because at some point, hopefully, right, they have the skills and they're, the empowerment that comes along with climbing out of debt, getting your finances more organized, and even feeling, like I said, excited about, the freedom and the options that opens up for people. So, how long do you typically, or what's the average that you tend to work with people, and when do they kind of graduate to
Yeah,
do it
no,
on
it's a
their
great
own?
question. Yep. When I'm in consultation with somebody, I'm trying to figure out like how much accountability they need or want, um, and what kind of problems we're trying to solve. How many problems, how deep and wide are those problems? And then we usually have them fit into one of two buckets. One is what we call a short-term intensive, where we work together over 5 sessions, usually over 90 days. Sometimes that creeps into like a 4 month mark, but we're trying to hit it hard. We've got frequent touch points and full sessions to kind of tackle a problem or tackle a challenge. More traditionally, we have one-on-one coaching over the course of a year. So we're like, all right, we're in it together. I'm your person, and we're going to do this for the next year, and then we evaluate at that time, like, all right, where we're at. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time people are ready to fly the nest at that point. Maybe a little nervous, to fly the nest, but I'm like, you know what, you got this. Like, I've seen you do this, you know what to do. You did such a great job pivoting when you found XYZ happen 2 months ago. You can do this. All right, so we're typically pushing them out of the nest about the 1 year mark. Some of them stay on, and we check in quarterly or we
Mm-hmm.
check in annually, right? So they still kind of have the phone a
The
friend,
touch point.
right, in their pocket.
Yeah.
And we've got some touch points to kind of make sure that they stay on track, knowing that they still have that resource.
And I can imagine there's a lot of people out there who might feel like, oh man, I'd love to hire somebody like Sarah, but how do I afford that if I'm in debt, right? And so there's this conundrum of like, when do I pull the plug, or how do I even make that happen? Do you have tips? Or, I mean, I know if you follow Sarah on Instagram at Journey to Influence, she already provides a ton of free ideas and content and tips. So definitely shout out there. Go give her a follow. But how do you help people to get over that hurdle, to even think about having room to hire somebody like you?
Yeah. The problem that you're trying to solve has to be big enough and important enough to make some kind of modification. So if it's just an inconvenience, you're like, yeah, I'd really like to get out of that eventually, but it's not really a pressure point for you,
Mm.
then it's probably not enough value for you, right? It won't feel worth it. But if you're at the point you're like, I am losing sleep, stressed out, my partner and I are arguing, like I've been circling the same item, right, for 2 years in a row now, then, finding our fee in your budget, honestly, quite easy for our team to do. We take a look and be like, all right, did you realize that you're paying 3 times more for your telephone bill than all the rest of our clients, right? Or did you know that you've got 12 different subscriptions to Paramount? There's some auditing that happens initially that like, oh, you signed up for Paramount on your account and I signed up for Paramount on my account. And like now there's some awareness that happens and some easy money that is typically found so that we can help you make sure that you can cover coaching fees. Even just that initial audit and kind of going through like, all right, like, are we using that? Have you called around for insurance lately and made sure that we had a good, like, there's just usually some softballs in some savings and frankly, some like holes in our wallets. We're like, oh gosh, did you realize that we were spending $1,200 a month on eating out? Well, could we do that a little bit less in order to make sure that we could afford a coach? Yeah.
Yeah. Or DoorDash or what have you.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
DoorDash.
Yeah.
Yes. The
Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah. Right. Fill in the blank. There's
Yeah.
there's usually opportunities, little pockets of opportunities.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm curious, now that you've been doing this for several years and you yourself feel like you have, you and your husband have climbed out of debt, you guys are prospering. So, talking about like the emotional stuff that you see clients go through and how that impacts their life positively, not just financially, but giving people options and giving them the freedom to actually choose something different for themselves.
Absolutely. Is the dollar figures are fun, right? To hear, clients paying off, thousands of dollars worth of debt. I just had a client that paid off his house, like
Wow.
no mortgage. Huge win. I love the numbers thing, but more importantly, honestly, what lights me up is I had a client tell me like my husband and I just started flirting again.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh gosh," right? And
Yeah.
it's just like because they were no longer fighting about their finances, they were on
Yeah.
the same page. It gave them the freedom and the bandwidth, right, to enjoy each other's company again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, seeing people make those like shifts in behaviors and habits and attitudes, right, about money that impacts other areas of their life. I had a client that her son was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years old when we were coaching, and he came on the call one time and he said, my mom told me that you're her money doctor. Is that true? And my mom told me that you're going to help us figure out our money and then I'm going to be able to go to Disneyland
Mm.
later. And I was
Yeah.
and they did. So like those kinds of things that are like more relational and have lasting impacts far beyond, right, the time that we're working together. We're just unpacking and freeing up so much more margin, not just with money, but with time and energy and relationship that just has compound effects down the road.
Yeah, 100%. And for your health, I mean, that's where we started, this conversation. We know that money stress does impact physical health directly. And so, just like everything else, these all of this ties together and yeah, the peace that you get when you know that you're on top of it, even if you're not fully out of debt, knowing that you have a plan and knowing that you see progress and that you start to feel more capable and more empowered to get it done. I think that is priceless, really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, where can people, I think I mentioned your Instagram, but I also just want to point out that you work with not only folks working on their personal finances, but also with small business owners like myself. And as a small business owner, I think many of us jump into this entrepreneurial life not with a lot of financial education and background. And so, gosh, like what we walked through yesterday, I spent 2 hours with Sarah yesterday walking through the first year and a half of my business finances and just so many great little ideas. I have a ton of homework now to do, but I'm excited. No, but I'm excited about like now I feel more knowledgeable about where I can make different different choices and just little teeny pivots in how I'm spending, shaving off 1% here and a 0.5% there can create room for me to do other things with my business that I'm excited about. So definitely wanted to make sure that people understood that you work with both. But where can people find you? How do they get in touch with you? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So on Instagram at Journey to Influence is a great place to follow and connect and just like take a peek, right, at what we're doing. And then our website is myjourneytoinfluence.com. You can take a look at our story. You can take it the different ways that we do coaching and take a look at the team. So there's a couple other coaches that work on my team as well. And scheduling a call is the best way to kind of take a gander at like what next steps might look like. No obligation. We strategize with you to figure out what we would do in that situation, and you get to choose whether or not you want a coach to walk alongside you or not.
Yeah, awesome. And I know you have like a small group that you're working through right now. It's like a small accountability group or what I'm actually thinking about joining. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about
Tell you
that
more.
because yeah, for folks who are, open to doing it with others, it's a little bit more economical, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about that option as well.
Yeah, I love working with small business owners. We're really like micro business owners or solopreneurs. Usually you've got, one yourself working and doing all of the things. Those are my favorites. We have a small cohort or accountability group where we meet a few times a month, 3 times a month. You've also got access to me as your coach. We've got an accountability Marco Polo group amongst the team, and we just keep it small and intimate, and we're working on the challenges that each person faces, learning from each other's questions, learning from each other's struggles. I love group format because it's so much more, there's so much more depth because you get to understand what everybody else is. You don't feel
Right.
alone. And also you
Yeah.
can speak into, right, breathe life into somebody else's challenge. Like, that's actually one that I have accomplished and I can figure it out and I can give you some insight.
Yeah.
And there's just a great community benefit of that. So we've got a small group that just launched this month.
Yeah, and I think as women business owners, a lot of us are intimidated, right, by
Mm-hmm.
finances
Yep.
and like I said, we don't necessarily get the education at home or coming up in our careers or what have you that maybe men get. I don't know, maybe men you probably know better. Men probably have just as many problems. But yeah, so I think it's a fantastic option because like you said, there's power in community, there's power in learning from each other and feeling like, okay, I'm not the only one. This is
Mm-hmm.
pretty common. There's no shame in this. There's no, so I think that is what's really powerful about those small groups. So
Yes, absolutely.
awesome. Well, thank you. I will include your information in the show notes for all our listeners. And thank you so much for your time today
You're
and
welcome.
for doing all the great work that you do. And I'm excited to see where our relationship goes and how I can
Yeah.
start to do some things differently for my business. So thank you, Sarah. And thank you to
Absolutely.
our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Dose. And we will see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Dose with Michelle Harrell. If today's episode moved you, share it, subscribe, and explore more at purplecityexperience.com. Until next time, stay open, stay grounded, and go beyond the dose.